guest in this important functions launched today, Honorable Simon Cherugoi, who is the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Labor and Social Protection, the Country Director, Kenya UNICEF, Mama Manisa Nzamani, our Chief Administrative Secretary, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start the program this morning, we request that we be upstanding for Kenyan National Anthem. Thank you so much. Be seated, please. Chief guest, variable visitors who are attending this important launch. It's a launch on the 2019 Violence Against Children Survey, National Prevention and Response Plan on the Violence Against Children 2019-2023 and the Spot It, Stop It campaign. Honorable guest of honors, we have a number of participants who are participating virtually. We have the U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Craig McCarter, chief guest and honorable guests, is actively participating virtually. We have Ministry of Education, the core ministries which are partnering in these concerns. We have Minister of Health. We are likely to be joined by the PS Minister of Health before we conclude this session. Waziri, I take this opportunity to appreciate and recognize everyone, those who are participating physically, in person, our development partners, wherever they are watching from and participating from. We have ministries, different government ministries. We have UNICEF, Waziri, which has put its very best in this process. We have our Chief Administrative Secretary. We have our heads of departments who have contributed, Waziri and guests, immensely to this process we are witnessing this morning. I therefore, Waziri, wish to take this opportunity to have a few speakers, with your permission and with the permission of dignitaries here, to have a few speakers make quick remarks which speak to the occasion. I wish to invite McDonald Pukudo from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics to make a quick remarks. Makobudo.
The CS Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Mr. Simon Chelugui, the CAS, same ministry, the PS, all the dignitaries are invited here today. Good morning.
Good morning.
I would just like to make very few remarks on behalf of the Director General, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. He was not able to come in person because of other commitments, but he sent me to do so on his behalf. We are actually very happy that we are joining this team for the launch of the 2019 Violence Against Children report. This is the second report that the Bureau is participating in, having done the 2010 Violence Against Children. The youth are an important resource whose capabilities need to be tapped for the development of this country. It is due to this recognition that the specific survey on violence perpetrated against them is key in addressing issues particular to this segment of our society. The first VAX that was done in 2010 provided stakeholders with a lot of information for programming, monitoring, and evaluation of various activities geared towards eliminating violence perpetrated against children. It is my hope that this particular report will be utilized to evaluate the gains made after the launch of the 2010 VAX. Now, the primary goal of Kenya government is to improve the quality of life of all Kenyans, including the youth, through the provision of evidence-based information to guide planning and influence policies. Many stakeholders have used data to make informed decisions regarding their activities, projects and programs, including monitoring and evaluation and identifying vulnerable groups in the society. The demand for the information on vulnerable segments of the population, such as children, elderly, persons with disability, and minority, continues to be enormous, and therefore launching the 2019 VAX is of paramount importance. Now, just going to our role in this exercise, KNBS had put a lot of emphasis on quality in every step of the data production process, right from the survey methodology, design of the tools, training of the interviewers, monitoring of data collection, and the whole process of data processing. In this survey, the Bureau was mandated to provide technical assistance during the survey in terms of 1. Survey design and methodology, 2. Recruitment of and training, 3. Coordination during data collection, 4. Monitoring of quality of data collected, 5. Data management, and lastly, report writing and dissemination. I wish to reiterate that the results of this report will provide requisite trend information that will facilitate evidence planning, budgeting, and programming by the policymakers and stakeholders in regard to this segment of the population. I would wish to appreciate and recognize the continued statistical support that we have received from our development partners, particularly CDC and UNICEF, for providing both technical and financial support for this survey. I also wish to thank University of California, San Francisco, and Liverpool VCT for their technical support for this survey. I request the development partners to continue supporting statistical activities in the country so as to help us meet the expanding data demand for statistics and also reduce the data gaps that we are currently experiencing. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank the Department of Children's Services for involving the Bureau in providing the technical support in conducting VAX and the recently launched 2018 Census of Street Families. Last but not least, I sincerely thank all the stakeholders for providing both financial and technical support for the production of 2019 Violence Against Children study. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Ladies and gentlemen, our next presentation is on the overview of the National Prevention and the Response Plan on Violence Against Children 2019-2023. This is going to be covered by Director of Children's Services, Noah Sangani. Noah Sangani.
Our CS, our CAS, the UNICEF representative in Kenya, and all the invited guests. I'm going to present on the National Prevention and Response Plan on Violence Against Children. And on the onset, this was a very consultative process, which involved government, departments, ministries, development partners, also civil society organizations, and also children were involved in development of this response. And this response is basically going to mitigate on the issues which will be ably discussed and presented by Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. I'll give an overview. It's a whole detailed report, but I'll give the main areas where our response will target on. But on the introduction, violence against children is never justifiable. It is actually preventable. We also have current challenges which involve violence against children. This is family disintegration. We have also harmful cultural practices which affect children a lot. Of late we have domestic violence and also stigma in terms of reporting of those children who have been affected. We have drug and substance abuse, which is affecting children. We have inadequate implementation and also enforcement of the laws, specifically targeting on children. We have insufficient financial and human resources, which is to fight against this vice. We, as stakeholders in Kenya, we have a desired change where we are looking at reducing the prevalence of all these issues to 40% by 2023. And in this reduction, there will be very clear activities which will lead towards that reduction. Now, I go straight to the strategies for the prevention and response. We categorized into 6 areas. And one of the areas which we are going to focus on is on laws and policies. There are many areas, children issues are in very many laws and statutes. So as a team who are developing the response, we are targeting on specific laws, review of specific laws, and in the particular, here we are looking at the Children's Bill 2019, which already has been developed by all the stakeholders and owned by this ministry. So we are looking at effectively, at the end of the day, effectively implement laws and policies that protect children from violence in Kenya. And in that category, I already mentioned, there are very many laws which, as a country, we are going to look at, which will be child-friendly laws to mitigate all these issues on violence against children. The second strategy, Chair, is on family support and economic strengthening. As a team, we are looking at promoting positive parenting practices and economic strengthening of families, which will eventually reduce the violence against children. And here, we are looking at empowering families to be able to be responsive in caring of children, to be economically able to take care of children. And specifically in this ministry, we are looking at the Inua Jamii program, which is going to enable the families to be economically stable. The third response is on education and life skills. Here we are looking at the school environment, making the school environment safe for children, and enabling the life skills training to be promoted in Kenya. And here we are looking at, if children are empowered, they have life skills, then they are able to be responsible adults in the country. The fourth strategy, our CS, is community interventions. And here we are looking at addressing the norms and values. We have already mentioned up there that we have challenges which involve norms, which are instrumental to the care and protection of children. This particular strategy, Chair, is going to focus on, we want to promote norms and values which will support non-violence against children, and will be also targeted based on gender, and will also improve the quality of our care to our children. The fifth response strategy is response and support services. Here we are looking at improving access to quality healthcare services for children. And here it is really targeted as universal healthcare, which is involving children. We are talking about child-friendly health services where children can be targeted, social welfare services, and also justice for all children. If a child his rights are violated, we would like to see a situation where a child goes through the justice system in a friendly manner until this child is rehabilitated and become a responsible adult. The last strategy, CS, is on coordination. The sector of children, there are several players, and we are looking at coordination of this sector by government, so that all partners are now handling issues of children from one common point. And in this area, CS, I'm looking at National Council for Children's Services, which have a legal mandate of coordination of the sector of children, which you already know that is what already they are doing. So all the other actors will be brought together by National Council for Children's Services, because the council is involved both the government, civil society, and also other religious organizations, so that it brings together the coordination of children's services in the country. And on the issue of monitoring and evaluation, we are looking at, as a country, doing both monitoring and evaluation as a team, not as segments, such that coordination through National Council for Children's Services and through the line ministries who are responsible for monitoring and evaluation, who are actually members of National Council for Children's Services. Then we are able to get data, quality data, and this we are looking at a situation where, like in the ministry, through the Department of Children's Services, a child protection information system which has been developed by partners, and now we can comfortably get daily data, which is quality and web-based. This is where we're looking at, and we want, as a country, through all these stakeholders, we do a midterm review of this strategy, and also end-term review with the aim of improving the services for the welfare and protection of children. Our CS, that is a brief. I've tried to summarize the many pages of the document, but the whole idea is that we are looking as a country. We want to plan as one team, not as different ministries, and this coordination of this sector of children is through your organization in this ministry, called National Council for Children's Services, but the overall responsibility of this response plan is based on your desk as a CS, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Our chief guests, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, coming to us is a very interesting documentary. Yes, as we were preparing this, it was very catchy. Spot it, stop it. And it caught the attention of everybody. This was spearheaded by UNICEF. So we almost named UNICEF, the entire UNICEF, Spot it, stop it. Honorable guest, presenting this important and very touching documentary is Rosalind Mutemi from UNICEF community.
The campaign provides then national awareness and information in terms of what violence on children is, what constitutes violence on children, its forms, what form it takes, the perpetrators of violence on children, how to prevent violence, where to prevent, and how to report violence on children. In terms of context, we've heard from the survey today, the report that we got, that many children in Kenya live in violent homes and communities. We also know from the surveys violence on children cases go unreported. But what we also know is that there are many forms of violence in Kenya on children. There's the physical violence, emotional violence. We have harmful practices like FGM and cutting. But in this campaign, what is that any form of violence, whether physical, emotional, sexual, or harmful practice, is wrong. And it is our responsibility to prevent it from happening and stop it when the campaign has provided multimedia messages and materials. Some of them you can see in this forum. And these materials include print materials. We have TV and radio messages. We also have information being provided through, for example, talking words, what we call word signage. We have brochures, and they are planned, your honor, distinguished guests, to ensure that we have our advocates at the communities where violence is happening in forms of already existing platforms, like with the border riders, because in every corner of Kenya you see border riders, and I think we don't have to look at them as perpetrators of violence. By them, we are able to work and move a step further in preventing violence on children. If, for example, we work with them as champions, and also they'll help us in stopping violence from happening. Mr. Chair, for this forum, I also want to say that the campaign has taken consideration of the younger children, the levels of ECD up to lower primary 3, and we've created a concept for them where we have a team we are calling ARC team, where the children are given information of what violence is, and then they're also able to be provided information on how to report, and they're also provided information on calling the child helpline number 6. I think some of the materials you see in brief, they have this form of materials that are really meant for younger children. Mr. Chair, or the honor for today's forum, in order to increase knowledge and awareness on what violence on children is, we have creation of, as had indicated earlier, in terms of posters, and the posters cover forms of violence. For instance, what you're seeing, this is posters that will be going to different, so that people don't continue to violate children and say that they are sorry, they do not know this was violence. Because one information they would know, physical violence constitutes what we provided in this example, belting, slapping, or kicking children. In this presentation, we have all violence and how they affect both girls and boys presented in the posters. We also have posters that cover information on sexual violence, affect boys and girls. We also have information that portray emotional violence, and we are honored today for this poster with a lot of emotional violence in Kenya reported in the form of bullying that happens in schools. And that is captured by this poster. And as I've said, most of this information is also conveyed in other channels of communication. Information on issues of FGM and female genital cutting. And again, in here, it's about what it is. And the key message for all the posters, as we have seen, and every other communication is that any form of violence on children is wrong. And the call to action is to report violence if it's happening to children, the children themselves, or even caregivers. They need to report to a trusted adult. They report to a children's officer, or they call. The other option is to call the toll-free child helpline 116. At the community level, as I said earlier, distinguished guest, we are thinking of partnering with the mobile teams of border riders, this time as champions to really help us as they can run with this message in every corner as they give people transport. As you know, in Kenya, this is a key means of transportation. And in this campaign, the thinking is, among many others, we are thinking of the border riders. Again, as I said, level and in the villages, we are thinking to engage everyone, at least to know that this is wrong, to violate children. And we will have the talking walls, for example, in this, or if you like, the wall signage. This is the activation in schools, like I said, for the young, and this could take forms of writing books. It could also take forms of, school bags. And lastly, I want to say the campaign is involved, including the evidence presented today and earlier evidence. And the key point for the campaign is that we can end violence against children in Kenya. So whenever we see violence, and if we spot any form of it, we must always stop it. Thank you.
Our chief guests, honorable guests, when we were doing the preparatory, this is one area which took our most attention. And guests, invite special guests today. We feel our chief guest, we should take this further, because this is going to create a very huge impact out there by the way it is developed. So we wish to thank UNICEF for this contribution. Chief guest, allow me and our honorable guests to introduce Dr. Lilian Otiso, who is the Executive Director, Liverpool Health. She will tell us whether Liverpool is the football club or what it is. Dr. Lilian Otiso.
Thank you very much. The CS, Minister of Labour and Social Protection, the PS, CS, and other distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dr. Lilian Otiso. As mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of LVCT Health, formerly known as Liverpool VCT Care and Treatment, but it's a Kenyan NGO, so we decided to make it more local to recognize our roots and the work that we do. And we have been leading on HIV and gender-based violence work in Kenya over the last 20 years. And we are proud to have been partners in this process, representing the civil society organizations and providing technical support for the data collection, but also the counseling services that are required as we did this survey and the subsequent report. I want to start my remarks by thinking about a story of a girl known as Abigail. Abigail was a 9-year-old girl from a slum in Thika from one of our programs. And Abigail she complained about having a leg injury to her mother, who took her to the hospital. In the hospital, no injury was found on the leg, but she subsequently complained of abdominal pains. Upon investigation, it was found that she had a fractured pelvis, which resulted in internal injuries, and it was found that she had been raped very viciously. Unfortunately, Abigail died. She was buried on 12th June this year. So this all happened during this containment process. Abigail's story is one of the hundreds of cases we deal with in the different slums we work with across the country. And it's an extremely cruel form of violence against children. As we are hearing, there are very many cases, including the sexual, physical, and emotional violence that children face. Unfortunately, Abigail was not able to disclose who the perpetrator was. But from our data and the data we've seen today, we know that this was most likely a family member or a neighbor or someone known to her. In some few cases, it is a stranger. For example, we've seen during the curfew period, when girls go out to the toilet at night, they're being violated. So this story just highlights how much we have all failed Abigail and other children in this country. We have failed to provide safety, knowledge about sexual violence, and a shelter, and adequate psychological and medical support when they report. And this is what we need to change. So today we have taken a bold step by launching this report and the response plan, which we have all worked very hard to develop. We as stakeholders all need to play our part in a coordinated manner to ensure the response plan is disseminated and fully utilized so that we can be able to make a difference in the lives of these children. As CSOs, we pledge to continue working closely with communities and providing the data and response to address violence against children. In the same way we supported this survey is the way we commit to continue supporting these interventions. For this to be successful, we therefore need to focus on the 3 areas. Some of them have already been highlighted, but just to really emphasize the aspect of coordination of all stakeholders, including the different government ministries, the development partners, CSOs like us, media, and communities, towards achievement of the plans laid out in the response plan. We also need robust data collection and management towards an evidence-based response tool that will be effective. And finally, financing from government and development partners that is adequate and sustainable to provide these services, including healthcare, shelters, medical legal support, and others that we know from the different stakeholders. We thank the government and the development partners like the US government, the UNICEF, and others who have supported us so far, but we urge for continuous support on these areas. We urge the government and everyone to give a voice to victims like Abigail and denounce all forms of violence against children. Let Abigail's death not be in vain. Thank you.
Daktari, thank you so much. The chief guest and our honorable guests who are attending the launch, you could see we jumped a very important president, who is called the President Kenya Children Assemblies. This is Madam Kaya Omar. We were trying to prepare her offline. Over to you, Madam Jennifer.
Rukaya.
The Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Mr. Simon Chelugui, the United States Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Kyle McCarter, UNICEF Representative, Kenya Country Office, Ms. Maniza Zaman, my fellow children, distinguished guests, members of the forecast set, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have only one plea. We must end violence. As Kenyan children, we have constitutional rights to life, education, parental love, safety, among others. Yet these rights are grossly violated. These ills manifest themselves in physical, sexual, emotional, online violence, child marriages, food insecurity, and child labor. Violence has adverse effects on the health development, the mental development, as well as the physical well-being of a child. We are at the risk of contracting diseases such as HIV, unwanted pregnancies, learning problems, missing school, depression, suicide, injury, and even death. According to the World Health Organization, pregnancy and childbirth complications are the leading cause of death among girls aged 10 to 19 years globally. Currently, the COVID-19 global pandemic and the subsequent closure of schools have contributed immensely to a spike in the cases of early pregnancies in Kenya. The report released by Sauti Sasa, an AMREF youth-led group, indicating that about 948 girls get pregnant every single day. Both girls and boys, and can happen at home, in school, in places of worship, at the market, everywhere. Such ills are mostly perpetrated by those close to us, like our parents, guardians, caregivers, and even our fellow children. When this happens, investigated, while most are kept in the dark. Fewer boys compared to girls report cases of violence. As the children's president, I urge all stakeholders to safeguard our well-being and protect us from all forms of abuse or exploitation. Time has come for the law, our families, doctors, the police, our teachers, and the whole community to hold hands and end violence against children. Collective action is imperative now more than ever. Thank you. Rukaya Omar, President of the Kenya's Children's Assembly.
That is the president of Kenyan children, and you can see she's speaking with that confidence of a president. I wish to, may I request that we give her another round of applause. Thank you, Rukaya, the president of Kenya Children's Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to kindly introduce the country director, Save the Children, Wangku, who is going to participate virtually. Wangku.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, good morning. I'm sorry for a little bit technical problem. Your Honorable CS, PS, and CS of Ministry of Social Protection and Labor, and all the development partners and colleagues from NGOs, more especially I think from our representative of children. We just hear how powerful when Rikaya is speaking, and we should all get back together and support her. So my name is Wang Le. I'm the country director for Save the Children. It's my great honor this morning to represent the CSO, but also I think Joint Force Alliance for Children's Rights, which compose 6 international children's rights organizations: Save the Children, World Vision, Child Fund, Plan, SOS, and Telebuzon. In terms of the joint, first of all, we'd like to congratulate the launch of the report, and also the response plan had been laid out by the Director of Children Protection of Children Services. And as well, UNICEF's colleagues in terms of sports and report campaign, because this is a significant step for all of us in Kenya to end the violence for children. Violence against children is significantly rapid in-country and a serious public health and human rights and social problem. Violence against children is never justifiable, but if underlying cause identified addressed violence against children entirely is preventable. We already know that COVID-19 has expanded violence against children, and especially girls. We must support all efforts to ensure that all children, especially the poor and the marginalized, continue to learn and return to school when school opens. As a part of civil society organization, we commit to ensure that we will support the violence against children survey report be launched today to be disseminated to the grassroots. And the Joint Force Alliance commits to support dissemination to 143 sub-counties in Kenya located across 41 counties. We propose to support the dissemination at the sub-county level and ensure that the various sub-county area advisory council are being reached through the dissemination and be supported. We are working with the government-led violence against children technical working groups to ensure this happens as soon as possible. As to ensure that voice of children are heard during the decision-making at the various level, governance in Kenya, especially in regarding to violence against children prevention and the response decision. The Joint Force Alliance reaffirms its commitment to strengthen child participation at the community, county, and the national level. Concurrently, need to ensure that children are reached and able to participate through virtual platforms, like in the view of current COVID-19 guidance. We recommend that child participation guidance be reviewed, including a new reality of virtual child participation and as well safely, while taking into consideration child safeguarding protocols and online engagement. We commit to provide assistance to review those guidances. We will also support the government of Kenya National Prevention and Response Plan on violence against children, 1993, to ensure its full implementation. As part of our effort to protect children during the current COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, the Joint Force Alliance for Children in Kenya is expecting a 3-year project funded from the European Commission that will continue to implement the violence against children prevention and response plan. We will invite all of you to join this journey together to support this 3 years project to contribute to the end of violence against children in Kenya. I would like to applaud all the effort by the ministry and all stakeholders involved in putting this together, this comprehensive report and the response plan, as well the public campaign. This is extremely important for all of us to start this journey. The coalition will continue to support raising of awareness on children's rights violation and to action and prevent stop violence against children, and to empower children to recognize and report violence
against themselves. Well, all together, I think this will be a reality. And thank you so much. Have a great day. Yeah, thank you. Over to you. Back to you, your honorable CS.
Chief guests, respected invited guests, as a very powerful speaker with the underlying comments. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite again Director General Kenya National Bureau of Statistics to wear another hat and make some statistical interpretation that focuses on this occasion. Mark Obudo is going to represent the Director General guests. Karibu, Mark Obudo.
Thank you so much, Bwana PS, for the chance again. Through the chairman, we have two quick presentations to make. One is on the methodology of how the survey was done, and the second one is on the results of the survey. And so my colleague, Mr. Robert Buluma, will actually take us through. Mr. Buluma will quickly take us through the very first part of the presentation, which is on the methodology. Is it ready? Okay. So we give him the chance to undertake that. Then I'll come in to give the results of the study. Thank you.
Our chief guest, CS Minister of Labor and Social Protection, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Robert Buduma. I want to present to you the survey methodology that we used to conduct the 2019 Violence Against Children survey. The Kenya 2019 VAX was a cross-sectional household-based survey. We interviewed 788 males and 1,344 females who completed the interview. The survey provides information on violence during childhood and past 12 months among the youth, the young adults aged 18 to 24, and also adolescents aged 13 to 17 years. And we also looked at HIV prevalence for the children aged 15 to 24. The VAX used national sample evaluation sample survey frame to obtain a national representative household sample. In this case, what we are saying is that the results are at national level. We didn't go down to the county level because of the sample. We used separate enumeration areas. These are what we normally refer to in the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics as clusters, which were randomly selected for females and males in each county. In the first stage, we took 266 enumeration areas from the 5,360 clusters in the frame. So for females, we had 155 enumeration areas, and then for males, we had 109 enumeration areas. The study used, in the second stage, we were selecting 34 In the second stage, we selected 34 households for every selected innovation area. And then in the third stage, we took one eligible respondent per household. The survey used what we refer to as a split sample approach. This means the survey for females was conducted in different communities from those for males. This approach was to protect the confidentiality of the participants. VAX used two questionnaires. The core questionnaire was administered to the head of the household, and then the participant questionnaire was administered to children aged 13 years up to the young adults aged 24 years. And this one we had two participant questionnaires, one for the male and another one for the female. The questionnaires were adapted through a consultative process of key stakeholders and partners. The participant questionnaire covered several areas in terms of demographics, education, general connectedness to the family, friends and community, endorsement of traditional gender norms, perception, witnessing violence in the home or community, sexual history and risk-taking behavior, experiences of physical, sexual and emotional violence, violence perpetration, pregnancy, health outcomes and risk behaviors, violence disclosure, service seeking and utilization of services, HIV/AIDS, service history. All participants were asked about ever experiencing childhood violence, that is violence meted to the children before age 18, and also experiences of violence in the past 12 months. We did translate the questionnaire, the main English questionnaire, into various local languages, Borana, Kalenjin, Kamba, Kikuyu, Kisi, Buya, Duo, Maasai, Meru, Mijikenda, Somali, and Kiswahili. Households were included if there was at least one eligible member of the household aged 13 years and 24 years. Interviewers sought consent from the head of the household for their own participation in answering the household questionnaire. For selected eligible respondents under 18 years old, the parent or guardian provided the consent for their dependent to participate. Participants who provided own consent to participate in the survey, we had the ages 18 years and above, those ones who provided their own consent. Then we had emancipated persons under 18, minors who were also married who are also allowed to provide their own consent. For minor participants who were dependents, after the parent or the guardian provided the consent, the participant was then asked for their consent to participate. So during data collection, supervisors and research assistants were recruited, trained, and posted to areas where they were well-versed with the local languages. Data collection was done electronically using CAPI, that is computer-assisted personal interview tablets with Open Data Kit program. Data collection was conducted using face-to-face methodology. The Kenya VAX adhered to WHO recommendations on ethics and safety. The survey protocol was independently reviewed and approved by various boards within Kenya and outside the country. This was to ensure protection for the rights and welfare of human research participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director, Kenya Bureau of Statistics.
So, Chair,
We have the second speaker.
Sure, thank you.
Please.
So, Chair, we, based on what my colleague has given, we now get into the results of the survey. Now, the key components of the results are touching on the sexual violence. Then we have the physical violence, and we also have the emotional violence. After that, then we also look at the perpetrators of the violence that were meted on the children, and then we also then look at the effects, what would result into such. And this is where we'll be able to see the element of pregnancies, we'll be able to see the kind of mental stress that the affected persons have. So then I would get to the slides which should be projected. Now, so on the screen you are able to see the slides. The first bit is on the response rates, and from the slides you are able to see that we had over 90% of response rate at the household level, and then we also had the individual response rates, which are for the female we had 81%, for the males we had 73%. Now the combined response rates now gave us, and this is what now the study had, gave us 74% for the female, and then 66% for the males. Then the results are showing that for those who are, for the proportion of persons who experience sexual violence, we have those who are those who are between 13 and 17 years. They were covered, the survey covered them for the last 12 months, what they experienced in the last 12 months. And we are able to see that for females it was 13.5%, those who experienced sexual violence. For the males it was 2.4%. Now, for those who are aged 18 to 24, we are looking at any sexual violence against them in the last, for the period before they turned 18 years. And we are able to tell that if 15.6% actually experienced sexual violence, then 6.4% were for the males. Now, because of slides are not moving. Now, when you look at for the sexual violence, there are different. There are a number of cases. We have the unwanted sexual touching. We have the unwanted attempted sex, and we have the pressured sex, and lastly there is the physical forced sex. So these results, all these cases showed different results, and because of time, I'll just move to touch on the physical violence, and then take a slide on the emotional violence, and then we see the effects of that. Otherwise, we have quite a number of slides, which of course you'll be able to get from the report. So unfortunately, the problem is at time that is a bit constrained. Well, maybe just to touch on this, some of this, the sexual violence that were occurring, there are those cases that occurred within and outside the homes, and then within the homes of the respondents. So the results are as per what we have on the screen. Then we also had the different times that they occurred. So I would then just move straight to what happened after the violence. Were there cases that were reported, and whom were they reported to? Then we take note that there are those cases, the females that disclosed the cases was 56.7%, and then we have for those who are 18 and 18 to 24, 41% of them reported the cases. Now, that varied from groups to group. They were reported to, some of them were disclosed to relatives, some were disclosed to close friends and neighbors, some were disclosed to service providers or the authorities. Now, I would jump a number of slides and get to the transactional sex that occurred in the last 12 months. This is the kind of sex that a person will engage in with the intention of having some gains, particularly money, gifts, or other benefits. So we are noting that among those who are 18 to 24 years old, the females, those females who had sex in this line of transactional sex were 6.1%. This is something that was noted in the last 12 months of the survey. There were also cases of seeking help behavior among the 18 to 24-year-old, and we are noting that about a third of them, for the females, reported sexual sought help. Then 34.2% of the males also sought help. Here, it never mattered whether you're male or female, because we are seeing that the percentages that sought help are basically the same. Then I would go to still on sex, on help seeking behavior. Among the males, only 33.2% sought help, and again 3.2 of those the first 3.2 that reported cases actually got help. Then 56% of those who did not, those who sought help, did so from doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers. That is where they were taking their cases to for help. Now, I would again jump a number of slides and go to the physical violence, which we are noting that in the for those who are 13 to 17 years, in the last 12 months, we are noting that 36.8% of the females were actually physically violated, or they were assaulted, and then their male counterparts of the had 40.5% violated. Those who are 18 to 24, 38.8% were physically violated, and that is for females. And for males, a higher number of 52% were physically violated. So we have that is for the physical violence. Maybe I just move straight to the emotional one, so that we can try to conclude on this. For the emotional violence, among the females aged 18 to 24 years, 7.3% experienced emotional violence by a parent or adult caregiver or adult relative before these fellows turned 18 years old. Then among the females aged 13 to 17, in the last 12 months, 12.3% of them actually experienced emotional violence. Again, either by parent or a caregiver or an adult relative. So, colleagues, because of time, we are not able to go deep into the results that we have here. But it is also equally important to just have a quick highlights of the effects of the kind of violence that we have been talking about, be it physical, emotional, or sexual. We are taking note that there are those people who have ever thought, who ever thought of committing suicide. And for 18 to 24 years, we had 12.8% of them. That is 12.8%. These are people who did not experience any any sexual violence. But when you look at those who had had some sexual violence, we are recording 29%. So you can see now between 13 to 29%. There's a very great difference, which means that the sexual violence had an effect in these people thinking of suicide. Again, when it comes to stress, those who had mental stress, those who were not sexually assaulted, we had 36%. But now this figure moves to almost 58% of those who are now experiencing mental stress, which is actually caused by that that sexual violence. Now the same happens now to the next category, but I will not really get to the details because we have the presentation. I request colleagues to go through them and get the details, and of course much of the details are in the reports. So I would stop it at this point, and I'm sorry that we are not able to get into the much details that the report has, but I just encourage everybody to get deep into the report and read, so that we can provide proper intervention for what the study has revealed. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Director. Our chief guests, honorable invited guests, allow me to take this opportunity to welcome Chief Administrative Secretary to make his brief remarks. The Chief Administrative Secretary, welcome.
Thank you very much, PS. Our chief guest, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Mr. Simon Chelugui, the Principal Secretary, State Department for Labor, Department for Social Protection, Nelson Marwa, other Principal Secretaries that are present, UNICEF Country Representative Kenya, Mrs. Manisa Sama, the United States Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Kael Makata. I also recognize the President, Kenya Children Assembly, Rugai Omar, Executive Director, VCT and LVCT Health, Dr. Lilian Otiso. We also recognize Director General, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My role this morning is to welcome our chief guest, Cabinet Secretary for Labor and Social Protection, to address us. But before you take the floor, sir, allow me to make brief remarks. Today, we gather in the name of our children and our posterity, not only as a nation, but also with the rest of the world, as we seek to protect our future from abuse and gross violations. Our society has been threatened over and over again with threats of violence and abuse targeting our children. This challenge is, however, not unique to Kenya, and this is not a justification for the violence, but an acknowledgement that one society challenge could be similar to the challenges in other communities. Thus, there is always the need for countries and the world to work together. Through this need, the government, alongside the rest of the world, committed through the Sustainable Development Goal, SDGs, specifically number 5, to not only end all forms of discrimination and abuse against our children, but also develop sound policies and enforceable legislation to strengthen and empower our children. The concerted effort has led to realization of notable milestones towards stemming violence against children. However, the modes of abuse have evolved, and we are therefore forced to make changes to our techniques. For children to be protected, a functional child protection system is imperative. One of the elements for a working child protection system is undertaking research and using research finding to work on tangible intervention. The National Prevention and Response Plan is based on the premise that violence against children is never justifiable, and if it is underlying causes are identified and addressed, violence against children are entirely preventable. Let this gathering here showcase and reaffirm our commitment in stopping violence against children. Chief Guest, before I invite you, allow me to invite other two very important guests. Here with us we have the UNICEF country representative to Kenya, Mrs. Manisa Zaman, to make her remarks. Karibu.
Thank you so much. Honorable Chelugui, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. Honorable Cass, P.S. Marwa, His Excellency Kyle MacArthur, United States Ambassador to Kenya, representative of the Kenya Bureau of Statistics, Country Director Save the Children, Executive Director LBCT Health, President of the Children's Assembly, and distinguished guests, members of the media, good morning to you. So I'm delighted to be here today for a cause that could not be more important, which is ending violence against children. We just heard a very heartbreaking narrative from one of our colleagues here, the colleague from LBCT Health. This is one of our children. This is one of Kenya's girls. And I think it should shake us all to the core to hear what happened to her. And sadly, every one of us here is likely to know what a child is experiencing, or at least a child who has experienced violence. Whether we realize it or not, we do know that child. Globally, it is estimated that 1 billion children aged between 2 and 17 years of age are exposed to physical, sexual, and emotional violence or neglect every single year. And that's about half the children of this world. And this is a shockingly high number, and that's why ending violence against children is a global priority for UNICEF and the United Nations as a whole. Every child has a right to feel safe in their home, their school, and their community. Violence scars children in too many ways. It causes permanent disabilities, it causes health issues, emotional scars that risk being passed down from generation to generation. And violence does not discriminate. Children from all social backgrounds and cultures are affected. And lastly, violence has significant economic costs, including loss of productivity when children become adults. So ladies and gentlemen, to better understand this situation and what can be done, the National Survey on Violence Against Children has been completed actually in 16 different countries. Kenya is only one of 2 countries globally that has done a repeat survey. And so all credit to the government of Kenya in prioritizing such data, which allows us to review trends and progress. Distinguished guests, this new National Violence Against Children survey that's been launched today by the government of Kenya, CDC, UNICEF, and other players will play a critical role in our work to end violence and abuse. And allow me here to appreciate the US President's emergency plan for AIDS relief for funding contributions through CDC, which provided technical support for this work. As you have just heard, this survey allows us to see where violence exists and in what forms and how we can target our efforts. To summarize, we heard 1 in 2 adults, young adults, said that they suffered violence in childhood, with physical violence being the most common. Those responsible, sadly, were most often people they knew and they trusted. Around 1/3 of children said they experienced emotional violence by peers, such as being bullied or being made to feel scared in the last 12 months. Nearly 1 in 6 women and 1 in 15 men said they experienced sexual violence as a child. Tolerance of the above is high, with around half the boys and girls telling researchers that it is acceptable for a husband to beat his wife. And also disclosure and reporting is low. So distinguished guests, while yes, these results may seem to be an overall improvement from the 2010 survey, I think these are very disturbing findings. These are not numbers, these are children, these are people, these are faces, and these are lives. And right now, with the COVID-19 and its containment measures, we know that this situation is being exacerbated. Families are under stress, facing uncertain futures and juggling many issues. Violence against children can become an outlet to frustrations, and children are also more at risk from online predators. In addition, UNICEF is concerned that children who are not in school can also be exposed to an increased risk of violence, including maltreatment, gender-based violence, and sexual exploitation. But we do know, ladies and gentlemen, that change is possible. And today, through the government, we see the government leading the way by launching a new 5-year National Prevention and Response Plan on Violence Against Children that specifically addresses the findings of this survey. The plan works across government ministries and with public and civil society, the private sector, and faith groups. The aim of this plan is both to help children suffering from violence and to stop the abuse from happening in the first place. And as you saw earlier from my colleague, UNICEF, the government, and partners are also launching the Spot It, Stop It campaign. This is a creative campaign, and it's a hard-hitting campaign because it needs to be. We want to build a social movement to end violence. We need to make sure that everyone recognizes what violence against children is, who is responsible and how to prevent it and how to report it, so they can stop it from happening or act when they see it. And the children too need to understand when they're at risk, what to do when it happens to them or to their siblings, their friends, and children in their communities. And so you see in your package the child-friendly booklet that helps to explain things in simple terms for children. And part of this campaign of Spot It and Stop It is also tailored to children themselves. In his remarks about ending violence against children by 2030, the UN Secretary General said, "Violence against children is a silent emergency that must end. If we want just, cohesive, and peaceful societies, we must tackle the violence that threatens children's lives and compromises the enjoyment of their rights. By ending violence against children, we invest in a collective future." Ladies and gentlemen, last year we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. The right of a child of freedom from all forms of violence is what state parties have signed up to as part of their obligations. Each one of us, in our own families, in our own communities, have a responsibility to prevent violence against children and to act when we see it. Please join us in this important issue. Let me end by once again appreciating the leadership of the government of Kenya on this issue. UNICEF, as part of the UN family, will continue to work with all partners to make freedom from violence a reality for every child in Kenya. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much for that very informative speech from UNICEF representative. UNICEF has done a lot in Kenya, particularly on the violence against children. Very well put. Thank you very much. Chief guest, it is now my humble duty and honor to welcome the United States Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Kyle Makata, to make his remarks. Karibu, Ambassador.
Balozi, please give your remarks. Balozi.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's check if it's still morning. Honorable Simon Chilugui, Cabinet Secretary, representatives, national and county governments, Mrs. Aman, representatives and fellow development partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to join you today for the release of this 2019 Violence Against Children's Survey Report, VACS, and the 2019-23 National Prevention and Response Plan on Violence Against Children. It's an exciting moment in the United States-Kenya partnership on many fronts. Just last week, we began negotiations on a historic free trade agreement, which will bring mutual prosperity for both of our countries. Today, we celebrate another facet of our strong and enduring friendship with this report and response plan we're proud to support. The Violence Against Children survey is important and timely. I'm saddened to see daily media reports about teenage girls becoming pregnant during lockdown, something which will have lifelong consequences for girls and their families. The consequences of dropping out of school are grim and cyclical, and adversely affect the survivors' socioeconomic well-being. Some of these pregnancies are a result which has unfortunately risen during this period. As well, we have seen an increase in FGM, one of the most dehumanizing and barbaric travesties in the world today. The increasing threat to children during this pandemic has been noted by the highest levels of the Kenyan government, prompting President Kenyatta to state recently, and I quote, "If the family is weak, the country is weak." These remarks came moments before he directed the National Crime Research Center to study the escalation cases of gender-based violence, disempowerment of girls, and the violation of children's rights. To understand issues like violence against children, we rely on sound and comprehensive data to make the best possible decisions about policies and programs to improve lives, but especially the lives of the most vulnerable among us, the children. The 2019 Violence Against Children survey provides us the tools needed for data-driven decision-making. While we celebrate the strides made in Kenya to mitigate violence against children and youth, we also recognize that violence is on the rise during the COVID-19 pandemic. The results of this report will directly and positively impact the lives of children and youth. With these new findings, Kenya is prepared through its National Prevention and Response Plan to prioritize future investments and directions that will help us collectively spot and stop violence against children. So we must act swiftly and responsibly. USA Marafiki stands with Kenya always to protect the innocence of its children and youth. A project as large as the VACS report and the National Prevention Response Plan requires the combined effort of many people and institutions to make it happen and produce results. I'd like to acknowledge the many partners that have made tremendous contributions to this important activity. Thank you to the Government of Kenya's leadership, through the Department of Children's Services, as well as many government agencies that have advised and guided the process. Thank you. I want to say thank you especially for identifying those that I identified hanging in schools as child abuse. I also want to thank the staff of CDC, PEPFAR, USAID, and UNICEF for the support provided in the development of these products. Other key partners that have endeavored to provide steady implementation include the University of California, San Francisco, LVCT Health and Population Council, Kenya, among others. Your collaborative contributions to this effort will help us all to move us into a generation where children can live innocently and freely without the fear of violence. I know that each and every one of us will work passionately to protect children at risk in Kenya as though they were our own. And with this being our motivation, let us commit to not allowing any missteps, delays, disorganization, or even incompetency on the part of anyone to prevent us from being successful at protecting these vulnerable children. Let history show that we acted quickly and compassionately. And I want to close with what Ms. Omar said. She said collective action is imperative now. And then Ms. Saman said these are not numbers, these are children. And I think with that in mind, we should be motivated to be successful at protecting every child and giving them the protection that they deserve. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Ambassador, for your concern on issues of early marriages and other violence against our children. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to invite our CS, Cabinet Secretary Honorable Simon Chelgui, to give his remarks and officially launch the report. Karibu Waziri.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the Honorable Patrick Mtutu, the Chief Administrative Secretary, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. I also wish to acknowledge our Principal Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Nelson Marwa, PSs who are represented in this lounge, Your Excellency, the Ambassador of the United States to America, to Kenya, Kyle Makata, who is attending virtually, UNICEF Country Representative to Kenya, Mrs. Manisa Saman. I wish also to acknowledge President of the Children Organization, Rukia Omar, all development partners and social partners joining us, representatives from government, ministries, departments and agencies, children who are joining us virtually from various counties, ministry staff, members of the Fourth Estate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
It is just afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to preside over the launch of key child protection and advocacy documents developed by the ministry in collaboration with various stakeholders. Kenya is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, an African Charter on Rights and Welfare of the Child, representing the commitment towards prevention and response to all forms of violence against children. The Constitution of Kenya, Article 53, is explicit on the protection of the child from all forms of exploitation and abuse. Several Kenyan laws also speak to the protection of the child from situations of vulnerability. Some of these laws include the Children's Act, the Sexual Offences Act, the Anti-FGM Act, Counter-Trafficking in Persons Act, the Education Act, among others. The government of Kenya conducted the first Violence Against Children VAC survey in 2010, aimed at establishing the magnitude, nature, and consequences of violence against children in order to plan for effective programming and resource allocation to combat violence and other forms of abuse. Consequently, a summary of findings and response plan 2013-18 were developed in collaboration with partners to prevent and respond to the violence against children. And the consequence of violence on its survivors are often devastating, causing negative outcomes associated with physical health, social mobility, success, and mental health. In addition, violence is specifically associated with increased risk of sexual transmitted diseases and infections, including HIV. Recent development in neuroscience has also revealed that negative impact of violence on brain development, especially in early childhood, is significant. Indeed, violence against children affects the entire social fabric, from the individual to the whole society. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know and has been said by previous speakers before me, violence can perpetuate a cycle. And we've seen people who experience violence at young age continue the same behavior even at old age. And in that case, it forms a very strong basis for us to act now so that we stop the perpetuation. The president of the children organization, the UNICEF representatives, the US ambassador, and all the speakers, including the Dr. Otiso, the executive director of LVCT Health, have all spoken very strongly on need to protect and care for our children, particularly at their young age. Being the policy holder and leader in developing ways and means of improving protection and care of our children, I want to give assurance on behalf of my ministry and government of Kenya that we'll endeavor as much as possible as a ministry to protect our children. The need to conduct the 2019 VAC, Violence Against Children Survey, was derived from the fact that the findings from the 2010 survey were nearly a decade old and needed to be updated. The 2019 Violence Against Children Survey was a nationally representative household survey of children and young adults aged between 13 and to 24, as indicated or given to us by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. It was designed to measure the prevalence and circumstances surrounding emotional, physical, and sexual violence against males and females in childhood before age 18. It also measured the prevalence of violence in the last 12 months prior to the survey, experienced by children aged between 13 and 17, mostly those going through adolescence. It identified risks, protective factors, as well as consequences of violence against children and service utilization. The rich data from the Violence Against Children Survey Report 2019 will increase our understanding on the frequency, the drivers, and the impact of violence. The report gives us a strong planning tool for combating all forms of violence against children in our country. When we compare the results from 2010 Violence Against Children Survey and 2019 Violence Against Children Survey, we see some decline in prevalence of children violence. This gives us a great encouragement that reducing violence against children is indeed possible, and our country has been making progress in the right direction. However, the overall prevalence is still too high, and it is important to note that some of the form of recent sexual violence experienced by girls aged 13 to 17 has increased from 2010 to 2019, which is concerning. More particularly what the US ambassador to Kenya has mentioned, and I think we all know, recently there were media reports of increased number of girls who got pregnant, especially during the current COVID-19 pandemic, where schools have closed, children are at home. I also wished to highlight the violence children experience in homes was found to be high, where children are exposed to physical violence, emotional violence, violent discipline by their parents, caregivers, or other adult relatives. And I think this one is very important, and I want to speak to Kenyan parents. Our children are a gift from God, and we should endeavor to protect and care for them. And if our parents actually treated us violently, all of us would not be here. And I want to appeal to all Kenyan parents and all parents that as we mentor and grow and guide, support our children, we should do it with love. We should do it with care, so that we produce a generation of responsible people in the next generation. our duty as current leaders, current parents, is to pass the baton of care and love, because when we have protected children, when we have strong families, we have a strong nation. And this is why we are launching this report today. I also wish to highlight children who witness or experience violence might learn that violence is appropriate for conflict resolution or is acceptable in intimate interpersonal settings. We have seen conflict areas, in conflict affected areas in Kenya. Majority of those who are perpetuating the violence, cattle rustling, some of them involved in all four, including the Al-Shabaab. If you go back to their childhood, you'll realize that they were taught these behaviors long before terrorism was acceptable and taught to these children, and they have lived it, they have perpetuated it. I think it is time to spot it and stop it. The 2019 survey has indeed found a high association between witnessing violence at home and child victimization of violence. Another critical finding is that children who experience physical, sexual, emotional violence suffer from mental health problems. Emotional violence, while its effects are not as visible as other forms of violence, was found to be particularly damaging to the mental health of children and youths affected. Recently, or 2 weeks ago, I did launch the Street Families Census report. And one of the biggest reasons or drivers of children moving to streets are violence at home. Young boys would fear to be disciplined by their parents, would end up in the streets. Girls who are abused at home and may not want to reveal to other people end up in the streets. It is time to spot and stop it. What is also alarming is a high level of tolerance of violence, such as corporal punishment, wife beating, and negative gender norms among children and young people. Believing violence is necessary or tolerated to make our children vulnerable to both victimization and perpetuation of violence. In this way, a cycle of violence perpetuates itself through families, schools, and communities. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to stop this cycle of violence to protect our children, their children, and generations to come in this great nation called Kenya. Beyond the pain and suffering of each and every child survivor of violence, economic cost of violence against children is too high for all sectors and the entire society to bear through direct service provision cost, undermined learning, and cost of productivity. The economic cost is unbearable. Currently, we are supporting over 300,000 children through social protection. Children who have run away, children who are maimed, children who are facing severe disability caused by by violence, or children who have been abused. A cost that we could transfer to service provision and infrastructural development of our country. We have moved people from mainstream economic activities to social protection. This must be spotted and stopped. Now it's time. Now, even in schools, it is now, and it is unlawful in this country, especially in schools, to give corporal punishment. And this is something that we are monitoring through the Ministry of Education. And we will continue doing the same to ensure that all institutions handling children are compliant with these laws. We now, however, have an unprecedented opportunity to address violence against children in our country. Based on the latest data from 2019 survey, as well as globally available evidence-based strategies to address violence against children, the government of Kenya has developed National Prevention and Response Plan on Violence Against Children in Kenya 2019-2023, using multi-sectoral, whole-over society approach with various line ministries, civil society organizations, and our development partners. It focuses on prevention of violence against children from happening in the first place, in addition to our response. Importantly, important aspects of this plan is that it aims to reduce violence against children in Kenya by 40% in the next 5 years. The plan has 6 strategic areas of actions reflecting multi-sectoral and the whole of society approach involving children, parents, caregivers, families, and communities, service providers, and the government, both at national and county levels. The plan includes a monitoring and evaluation plan and will also be costed to know how much it will cost to implement the strategic action. The National Prevention and Response Plan 2019-23 will guide programming and resource mobilization for child protection programs in Kenya. The data from the 2019 Violence Against Children Survey and National Prevention and Response Plan on Violence Against Children will together aid in reviewing the national prevention and response strategies. To ensure that our children also get a snapshot of the Violence Against Children National Prevention and Response Plan, a child-friendly booklet on protecting children against violence has been developed in a simpler language they can understand. It will assist children be aware of the various kinds of violence, why children experience violence, and where they can seek for help. As part of addressing the norms, attitudes, and behaviors around violence against children in our society, we need a movement, and today we are also kick-starting a public behavior change campaign on violence against the children. Spot it, stop it. Everybody spot it, stop it. Spot it, stop it. Spot it, stop it. Thank you. The campaign materials aimed at creating awareness from the national to the grassroots levels on violence meted against children. And now we can stop it. They are advocacy materials to drum up support, to combat the vice and raise the resources for implementing programs to stop physical, sexual, and emotional violence against our children. And I think it's also important to just highlight some of the findings, just to drum up. I know National Bureau of Statistics have given us the key findings from the report. 45.9% of female experience childhood violence. 45.9%. Almost half of our girls experience childhood violence. 56.5% of males experience childhood violence. Over 50% of male. Physical violence is the most common type of violence experienced in childhood, with 38.8% of female and 51.9% of male being victims. Who are the perpetrators? 28.9% of female and 37.9% of male cited parents, caregivers, and adult relatives to the perpetrators of violence. 30.9% of female and 31% of male also cited childhood emotional violence by peers. What is the level of disclosures of this violence? 41.3% of female reported sexual violence to someone else, and 41% of female and 39.2% of males reported physical violence to someone else. In terms of service seeking or refuge or reporting, 1/3 of youth knew where to report sexual violence, only 33%. However, among the female, only 12.5% sought service and only 10.7% received service successfully. For male, only 3.2% sought and got service successfully. For both male and female, only 1 in 10 sought service against physical violence, and only for female 7.2% and male 6.4% received service after reporting physical violence. What are the consequences of childhood violence? 1. Sexual risk-taking behavior. Females 94% and 69.3% were more likely to have multiple partners in their life. And on mental issues, the consequence of this violence. Female who experience childhood violence are more likely to experience mental distress at 77.4% and suicidal ideal at 40%. So if you look back, those who commit suicide, 40% of those who commit suicide today would have experienced childhood violence at their early life. And violence perpetration, 12% of females who experience childhood violence are also likely to perpetrate violence on others. These are the statistics, these are the numbers, these are the real numbers, and they say numbers don't lie. So for us to address societal challenges, for us to address some of the criminal cases we go through now, we must begin by spotting it and stopping it at the earliest time. My ministry on its own cannot address all these issues affecting children in the country. This requires concerted efforts of all stakeholders. We recognize the role of development partners and stakeholders who continue to play in ensuring that we all together achieve the goal of preventing and responding to violence against children in our nation. I wish to particularly recognize the efforts of social partners, development partners, government ministries, departments and agencies, county governments and non-governmental organizations, and general public for your continued support to the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. We appreciate the technical and financial support we receive from the U.S. government through the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, the United Nations International Children's Fund, UNICEF, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and partners in development of these important documents that we are launching today. We also recognize the participation of more than 2,000 children and youths who participated in the survey, as well as development of National Prevention and Response Plan. We appreciate the multi-sectoral and multi-agency approach that led to the development of these documents and count on all of us to continue to work together to prevent and to implement the plan. Ladies and gentlemen, as we will move forward, we will seek to strengthen the linkages and collaborations with all our partners and stakeholders, which we have built over the years. At the same time, we will strive to establish new partnership and collaboration, especially in key emerging areas relevant to our mandate. My appeal to all of us is to work together as we all seek to protect and serve the child in this great nation. The government of Kenya, in collaboration with its development partners, is committed to addressing the problem of violence against children and will continue to support and monitor the actions resulting from the survey finding. It's our collective responsibility to prevent violence and shift harmful norms to create safe, protective, and nurturing environments where children and young people have the opportunity to live their lives to the fullest potential. And before I conclude, as I've said, to thank the social partners and appeal to all Kenyan parents. We've seen from the statistics, majority of our higher violence rate is experienced at homes. Let us foster and care and protect our children. Let's have peace at home. Let's maintain order. Let's maintain love. Let's seek to have love within the family level, within the family setup. Kwa Kiswahili ningependa kwa wale ambao wangeelewa Kiingereza kwamba leo tumekutana kuzindua ripoti kubwa sana ya ile madhara na ile shida watoto wetu wanapitia kwa mambo ya saa zingine wanaumizwa na wazazi, na wengine wanaumizwa na wenzao, wengine wanaumizwa na wananchi ama jamii. Na kwa sababu hiyo tumeona watoto wamepitia machungu, wamepitia shida kubwa sana, na hiyo inaleta matatizo katika maisha yao, haswa wakati wanapokuwa watu wazima. Na ombi letu kama wizara ni kwamba tutazingatia na tutailinda na tutachunga watoto. Tuko na sheria mengi sana ya kulinda na kuzuia nakosa lugha Kiswahili na ngumu, madhara ambayo watoto wetu wanapitia. Kwa sababu hiyo ningetoa tahadhari kwa wale wote ambao wanaendelea kuumiza watoto kwamba tutakuwa macho na tutaongea na wale maafisa wetu wote ambao wako kwa county, tukishirikiana na wizara zile zingine kama wizara ya ngao ama wizara ya interior, ma chief, assistant chief, madio, deputy county commissioner na county commissioners na maaskari wetu, askari polisi. Tuko na maofisa hata wale wanakaa katika ofisi ya jinai DCI ambao wanapokea ripoti kutoka county na kutoka mjini. Na kama kuna yeyote ambaye atahusika kwa mambo ya kuumiza watoto, kupiga watoto, kujaribu kunajisi watoto, wasichana wetu, tumeweka ratiba kamili ya kuweza kuzuia, kuwashika na kuadhibu hao wote ambao wanaendelesha madhara kwa watoto wetu. So nataka kushukuru wale wote ambao walihusika katika kuandika hii ripoti kama Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, na pia usaidizi kupitia UNICEF na balozi na rafiki wetu wa nchi ya Amerika ambao wametusaidia kuandika hii ripoti. Asanteni wote, asanteni sana, pamoja na wale wote tunafanya katika wizara hii ya Labor and Social Protection, CS na PS na timu yake yote. So it is with those many remarks, therefore it is now my honor and privilege to officially launch the Violence Against Children Survey Report 2019, the National Prevention and Response Plan on Violence Against Children in Kenya 2019-2023, the child-friendly booklet on protecting children against violence and violence against children, Spot It, Stop It campaign. On my behalf and on behalf of the government of Kenya, we commit to actively implement the Violence Against Children National Prevention and Response Plan 2019-2023 and provide the required leadership and guidance. Together, we will provide the conducive environment for the growth and development of all children in Kenya. Thank you and God bless you. So, where are the books?
Okay, so Mr. Sanga and Madam Zaman, kindly
like you to, you receive the book, and then we hand it to you.
We cannot contact people from this mic.
Wasaidiana na utisi. Saidiana na yeye.
Now, are you done?
Yes. Yes. You are so much part of it.
Good. Well done.
Hakuna mnano mtaona.
Another one?
There is another one?
Yes. And then you escort it from that end.
Same way. Vanessa, there you are.
Yes.
Here, this side. Thank you.
There's another one.
This is easier.
Easy.
This is easier. Maybe I can just... Yes, you like it, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. It's a very good one. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, take a photo of them and see it.
Then,
Yes.
Well done.
So the final document is going to be virtual by Rokayata, but we have the dummy book with us. So kindly just follow the screen.
Rukaya is
So Rokaya is online?
Yeah.
We wait for Rukaya to hand over the report. The friendly, yes. The friendly one, yes. The child friendly. But we wait.
Oh.
Wait for Rukaya to come.
Yes. Tangoja sana. The child to hand it over to you. Hand it over to you here.
Kaya, switch on your camera.
Give her some seconds.
It's virtual.
Yes, the virtual handover. We are learning what it is.
Yeah, this
Switch on your camera. I can see you, but I can see your copy, but I can't see your video.
We want to see the camera, the face.
It's Rukaya, not Rukia.
And then we... Yes.
There she is.
Okay. So...
Yeah.
Pale mahali mikono iko.
Picture of her and giving it to you.
You'll receive the double one. You receive that. Yes.
Maliza? Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes, you're taking very good care. Huh?
Thank you. Thank you. Now, well done. Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we have one group photo.
Distance, then the media, the social media starts talking. Oh, you did, huh?
I want to try to start writing.
All right.
Okay, are you done?
You are far apart.
We can't come closer.
Oh, sorry. No, we can't come again.
That's enough.
You need to use other technology.
3D cameras.
Mwezi wana meno so hakuna shida.
Good.
Thank you.
Well done. Many thanks. Oh, there's a vote of thanks.
Vote of thanks.
Yeah. One done. Jennifer, vote of thanks. Was for court charge.
I don't think we have to see. We just that is very good.
A new number.
Are you ready? Marcelina, propose for cause. Marcelina, propose for cause. Are you there?
Since His Excellency spoke about it 2 weeks ago, he spoke about this issue.
Please switch on your
It's very
camera.
timely for the ministry to have this information.
So you can give it background, what we said,
Yeah.
and then now what we are doing.
Okay. Okay, I would like those
That is
pieces. Yeah, I will send it to you. You know, I feel it.
Mr. Frederick, we're waiting for Marcelina to talk.
There she is. Can just set the camera. Can just set the...
Please set up the camera so that we can see properly.
Okay, she's
Marcelina, are you there?
technical hitch.
Okay.
Just tell Rukaya to do it. Oh, where's our governor Nairobi? Oh, there they are.
Frederick, can he talk? Can she talk? Okay, you have to unmute yourself.
And set the laptop more on the roof.
She can't speak without being seen.
Yes.
Okay, Rukaya.
No.
Okay, go ahead, Maseline, and talk. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes. Hello. My name is Vasilina Chebet, Governor Kenya Children's Assembly, West Pokot County. I would like to thank the organizers of this function for giving me this opportunity to speak on this important occasion of the launch of the Kenya Violence Against Children Survey Report 2019. The National Prevention Response Plan 2019 and the Spot Each Stop Each campaign. It is a great honor and privilege for me to extend the vote of thanks to all those who put in their time and resources to ensure this function becomes a reality. First of all, I would like to thank the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Mr. Simon K. Chelugui, the Principal Secretary, State Department for Social Protection, Mr. Nelson Marwa Sospita, Chief Administrative Secretary, Honorable Patrick K. Olenchunchu, United States Ambassador to Kenya, His Excellency Kyle Makata, UNICEF Representative, Kenya County Office, Ms. Maniza Zaman, LVCT Health, Dr. Lida Notiso, County Director, Save the Children, Wang Li, Acting Director, Acting Country Director, CDC, Dr. Kevin Dikoff, Director of Population and Social Statistics, McDonald Obudo, Director General KNBS, Mr. Zachary Mwangi, and the Director Children's Services, Mr. Noah Sangani, progressing this occasion and for yours continuous efforts to better the lives of children in Kenya. I would like to thank the President of the Kenya Children's Assembly for your beautiful speech that represented the sentiments of the children in Kenya. I want to thank our partners, Centers for Disease Control, CDC, UNICEF, USAID, University of California, San Francisco, LBCT Health and Population Council, and Save the Children, who supported this process and ensured we have this beautiful document on violence against children. May I thank the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, State Department for Gender Affairs, and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, the State Department for Social Protection, Department of Children's Services Officers, the Kenyan children, their parents, guardians, and all who in one way or the other contributed in any way towards the success of this document. Special thanks goes to the organizing committee for devoting your time in planning and ensuring that everything done on this day goes as planned. A big thank you to all the members of the press and all who have participated in the physical and the virtual launch. Last but not least, I would like to thank the Almighty God for enabling us to finish the function well. I am happy that issues on child abuse can now be discussed in such forums and children have a chance to contribute to such debate. I hope that this document will assist in finding solutions to some of the issues brought forward in the survey report. I therefore call upon all stakeholders to commit to implement the National Prevention and Response Plan 2019. To
My fellow children, let us take this chance and stand to be counted by the children of the future as we engage and make life easier for them. Let us spot each violence against children and stop it by calling 116 free of charge. May God bless you all, and please keep safe and adapt the Ministry of Health guidelines on COVID-19. Thank you.